Hello, this is Katherine Ebury. You may remember me from studying prose, which I was the convener of, but I'm here to talk to you today about my approved module, LIT265, Literary Mad Scientists from Frankenstein to Einstein, which is based on my own research in the area of the 20th century and also literature and science. So a little reminder of who I am. I'm a lecturer in modern literature, work especially on the 20th century and on modernism. You might remember some short stories by people like Joyce and Woolf, and those are the authors that I like to work on. My broader research is about the relationship between literature and science, which we'll come to in a minute. But my monograph, which I should probably plug, my book, Modernism and Cosmology, is out with Palgrave in 2014. And that book sort of looks at astronomy and the universe and how the crazy world of space is represented in modernist authors' texts, especially Yeats, Joyce, and Beckett. So the module that you'd be taking if you signed up for it looks at the influence of science on literature, and vice versa. There are some cases where literature does influence science or is an integral part of science. For example, a couple of years ago, recently, there was a synthetic cell created, and as part of kind of tagging the cell and trademarking it, the DNA was inserted, and some of that kind of spelt out, if you could read it powerfully enough, quotations from James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which is a rare example of literature becoming very much part of science, and we'll look at things like that, certainly in the early weeks of the course. We'll be covering canonical literature, sort of, the great novels, poems, plays that deal with this topic, but also we'll also look at classic science fiction, a more kind of popular culture response, and we'll also look at popular science writing, writing for non-scientist audiences about the scientific world, to kind of get a sense of where these authors' scientific knowledge might have come from. The module will cover all different sciences, so that you kind of get a lot of variety. We're not just dealing with something really general. So we'll look at biology, we'll look at Darwin and things like that. We'll also look at robotics when we come to look at Isaac Asimov's short stories. And the focus of the module will come from a focus on the figure of the scientist, the mad scientist, the inspired genius, the person who is creative like an artist, like Einstein, for example. We'll provide a focus for our discussions in the course of the module, so we'll always be looking out for scientists in literary texts. An example of something that we might look at is this poem by Laird, The Effects, which was inspired by, he's a contemporary poet, which was inspired by his discussions with an actual astrophysicist. Stars too are born and die. One might collapse in space-time, be massive, compact, vanish. Amid photos of supernovae, the neon pulsing plasma calls. Is this rudimentary study done with a compass and a pencil? Black hole, artist's impression. In modern death, no light escapes. Time stops. You cannot see it. Only know the wobbles of the bodies on their axes, in their orbits. And in many ways, this poem is about very human concerns. It seems partly to be about death, partly about grief, but also about the poet's wish to represent the wider universe and how difficult that might be. We see this rudimentary study done with a compass and a pencil that tries to imagine what a black hole would be like, which is almost impossible, and yet the poem tries to do it. So we might be having conversations about contemporary poetry like this, but also many other different kinds of texts. The assessment for the module is a research project report, which you'll go away and read and learn about science and how it might apply to a literary text, and give a report on what you've learnt, which will build to a written essay of 2,500 words. The first assessment worth 40%, the second assessment worth 60%. And teaching format will be one interactive workshop with me, led by me, but also a space for you guys to discuss things in groups, and a seminar. Other information, it's worth noting that you don't need to have any existing scientific knowledge, just an interest in what we'll be discussing as part of the course. Suggested possible reading, text that we will definitely be discussing, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Wells' The Time Machine, and Michael Frayn's Copenhagen. It's also worth noting that I hope to offer a field trip depending on student numbers and funding, etc. And here's my contact information. Please do feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions at all about the course, and I'll be very happy to help. Thanks.